G'day, g'day, wherever you are in the multiverse. This is Mastering Music, Mastering Life. Tony Jack the Bear Man's here at Deluxe Mastering Melbourne, Australia for another episode of the podcast. And after several false starts and lateness and preamp change and mic change and all kinds of adjustments, I'm so delighted to have back on the podcast Mr. Bob St. John in Florida. G'day, mate.
Thank you, Jack. It's good to talk to you again.
It,
There's only a few technical issues. That was no big deal.
What was that?
There's only a few technical issues. We're good.
Listen, you're a professional, man. You just know how to navigate that stuff, just like marbles in your hands. You're doing. How's it going up there, my friend? Since we last spoke, you've been busier than
really
a one-legged man and ass kicking competition, yeah?
No, it's actually been the busiest summer I've had in a couple of years, so I'm not going to complain.
That's awesome, man.
It is 1,000,000 degrees here. I can tell you that.
Yeah, we've had a pretty cold winter down here. I think is it El Nino or Nina that we're experiencing right now? I don't know.
Nino. You have to work in Spanish, Jack, if you're going to come and visit in Florida.
Yeah, I'll take a crash course and I'll brush up on my Spanish. But mate, the reason we got you back after we had a great conversation last time, and we've obviously kept in touch since the podcast. And I said we want to get you back, and today we were going to field some questions from people to answer a few questions around production and mixing and mastering. So you'll be answering all the questions today. I'm just going to sit back and fire off the question. No, but we're living in a time now where the access to information from people who are, whether it's for free or for a price, but nonetheless, the just, real world professionals who are now sharing information and knowledge. I think it's fantastic that we have that, because back in our day, you couldn't have, Bob Clearmountain. There was no internet, but, Bob Clearmountain wasn't going to be there doing a workshop, or Andy Wallace or Glyn Johns or any of these guys, right? It just didn't exist.
No. So we could read it and you would soak up as much as you could. I can remember being a kid in my 8-track studio reading an interview with Clearmountain. It was like a hero to me, and just soaking up every tiny fragment of it. I think I read it about 30 times.
Yeah. Who actually were your engineering heroes growing up?
People ask me that question all the time, and always Bob Clearmountain, Hugh Padgham, Mike Shipley, somebody I'm forgetting. That's the music I listen to. Those guys to me had the best ears and still do.
Yeah. Yeah. So Clearmountain's still at it. He's still. I saw him doing something.
You know what? Where Clearmountain inspired me is he's always adapted. He's always changed.
Yeah.
And his sound is very identifiable, but everything sounds different. And I've always said to people, there's already one of me. You don't have to be me, because if people want to hire me, they can find me usually. So you emulate your heroes in some way, and then you branch off onto your own. But that's the thing I liked about him, and the thing I modeled to myself, is I try to do something different all the time and not the exact same thing. Although people will always say they can identify that I did it from listening to it.
Yeah.
I don't ever expect to be at the level of a Clearmountain. I just, the way he hears things is far different than me. But to me, that's something to aspire to.
Yeah. It's always fascinated me. What is it that creates it, because it's always a matter of degrees. It's there are guys out there who are all incredibly competent at doing their thing, and and I wonder sometimes, is it a skill set, or is it sometimes the fact that these guys, also had the good fortune, which they earned, the opportunity to work with, certain bands and certain quality production, and therefore there is this perception, I guess, that that is attributed to them. You know what I mean? Because there's budgets, or there's certain things that probably make it advantageous, but they still had to be good to do it. Do you know what I mean? I wonder if that plays a role sometimes, or is it a case of if anyone else had the same opportunity, they still probably wouldn't have been able to extract everything that they did. I don't know what the answer to that is, but
I think that there's a unique set of circumstances that go into making any engineer who they are. And it's certain people came up in a certain time. I mean, technology is completely different now than it used to be.
Oh shit! Yeah.
And in some ways we can be much lazier. than we once were before, you know, where you don't have to spend all this time getting the best drum sound because you know you can trigger some sounds or repair it. You don't have to spend all this time getting every single word and a performance in tune because you know you can fix it. Back then, I'd say up until like the mid 90s, there were no choices. You had to do it right or it was just going to suck. There was not a lot of ways around it. I mean, I can still remember manually tuning vocals with a harmonizer. But, you know, in order to do that, you had to actually go down one analog generation. We had to record it onto another track and then turn the micro tuning on it. So I think that there's a new generation of engineers have come up in a whole different way, hearing things in a different way. When I was learning how to engineer, I'm sure when you were learning how to engineer, we weren't worried about anything below 50 hertz in our mixes.
Yeah.
You know, if anything, we were trying to avoid it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's like, you know, you got to have some subs in there because that's what people are used to hearing, even if they're listening to them in iPod earphones. You know?
Yeah. And now, you know, remember the ghetto blasters had those bass exciters and people with their, you know, massive, you know, with, you know, the 18-inch subs in the cars, and that it's now become mandatory, you know, and that's the holy grail for most engineers. Most engineers I get to work with, and I guess this is one of the first questions that was going to be asked of you. And that is, again, I'm just pulling, you know, there just seem to be a lot of similar questions. So I'm just pulling these in a general category. And one of them, and I think this is a really good, valid one, which is, how do you contain, control, or manage to separate, you know, the bass and kick from sub to get great, you know, extension without the muddiness and definition? So, you know, what are the things that you do, or how do you manage to do it? Because you're mixing in a room. You don't have, I'm assuming you don't have subs in your room, or?
Yeah, I do have subs in here. Yes.
Oh, you do. Okay. So tell me, it's good. So tell me about, because a lot of people wonder whether it's good to have subs in the room, but how do you control the bottom end? You know, what are the things that you do, or what are the things to look out for?
I mean, one of the first things I suggest to anybody, whether it's a musician or somebody who's just doing music as a hobby, is to get a subwoofer. Go find a cheap one if you have to, because you have to hear what's down there so you can actually get it out there knowing what's down there.
Yeah.
You know, and it's been, 17 or 18 years since I mixed without a sub. I can vaguely remember it now because I use General X with a General X sub, and I've been doing that for a long time. And General X weren't always my favorite speakers. I used Pro X for a while, which I loved. But the producers here in Miami, everybody had General X with a sub. And they come to my studio and they see the Pro X and go, well, I'm not really familiar with these speakers. So I bit the bullet. And the General X, I had difficulty getting used to it first. Now, of course, I've been listening to them for so long. That's what I do the majority of my work on. You know, if I had larger budgets to work with, I'd buy a new set of monitors. You know, that was something that was going to be a little more concise. But this is what I've been working on, and it's working for me. So you got to be able to hear the subs first before you can try and define what you're going to do. Now, I have a few tricks that I use in that. Is that, you know, very often I'm triggering samples to augment like kick drum with. Even when I record the kick drum, I can't always get ideally what I want. And I say augment, which is really important. You can't replace a drum sound. I know people like to wax, have a fantasy about that, but it doesn't work like that. Even with slate trigger, which is the best there is, you're not going to get it 100% dynamic like a human would play it, you know?
Yeah.
So you need some of the actual drummer playing in there. So I will mix in some of the kick along with one or two samples, one that will be like a close mic and another one to add a little bit of boom to it. And then from that, I will sometimes add a little bit of sub with it. There's a plugin called Low Ender that I use, which you have to use it judiciously. It's very much akin to the old DBX 120 XDS, which I had forever, and then found, all plugins that did this just as well and where I could control them. So what I'm doing is I'm able to get a little bit of that, 30 hertz energy and bleed just a little bit of it in, because I'll assign all these kick things to one bus and just add just enough to it to get that oomph on the low end. So what you're doing is you're opening up a spot for the bass in the middle there, because you're not going to have that much energy down low in the bass. So you get the kick to move some air, and you get the bass to occupy that space, say between, when you're coming between 90 and 30 hertz. So you've got a little bit of space to carve out for the bass to have its low end. I don't use any subharmonic anything on the bass. I've made that mistake once or twice. So a funny story for you. As a Duran song, I mixed for the movie The Saint. It's actually in the outro credits. And when I mixed that one in Boston. And at that time I was using Genelex without a sub. And I was using the 120 XDS, and I would just actually use it on like an aux send, and I added a little bit of it to the toms, and it sounded great in the studio. And I forgot all about the song, forgot all about the mix, forgot about everything. And one day I'm watching it on my home entertainment system, and of course, what happens when you work on a lot of music, you forget you work on it. Yeah. I think I mentioned that in our last webcast that, for a fleeting moment when you don't recognize it, you actually get to make a real subjective judgment on your own work.
Yeah.
That's selective amnesia, audio, oral amnesia. And so I'm sitting listening. I've got like a big, 15-inch sub with the system, and there's all clip speakers, and I hear this like deep, low exploding sound on the toms. And I'm like, yeah, I might have put too much of that on then. Again, it's important. It's important to be able to hear the sub so you know what you're doing. You can't do any of this without having a sub. Yeah. Otherwise, you're just, you're shooting totally in the dark, and that's not a good thing to do. Yeah. So what I do is I use that subharmonic thing on the kick to open up a little space on the bass. And as far as the bass itself, I love the Universal Audio's API 560 plugin, which most people shy away from a graphic for that sort of use. But what it is, if you got like 120 and 200, you got like 120, 240 on it, you can actually help bring out that presence there that you can't do. There are things you wouldn't normally do with a parametric. So, and that and a little bit of compression, and they all sit there pretty well together. I mean, as time has been going by, although I see it shifting somewhat now, but I've definitely spent the last 8 or 9 years training myself to use less and less compression.
Yeah.
Now, of course, everything I hear is squished to death. But at least on this end, I give the mastering engineer a little bit of latitude to work with, because I think if you start with it pinned loud, I don't know where you guys go with that.
Yeah. Well, we still get a lot of stuff that comes in that's been. Yeah, some engineers just like to send it a certain way, and even if you very kindly request for them to remove it, sometimes, the dog ate the hard drive, and some engineers, for the most part, people are pretty cool. I find. Usually it's inadvertently left on when they print it and they send it off your way. But the bottom end thing's interesting, because I find in the work I do, it's about 80% of the issues that I find are bottom end issues with people's mixes. And again, I attribute that to the fact that, people, usually that is too much more often than not. So things will come in. It's a bit too much in the bottom end, and I don't mind a little bit of that, because I can always carve it out, and usually either a little bit of shelving using the old dangerous back EQ, or I might get into a fab filter multi-band, just one band of it, and anywhere from 50, 60, 40 hertz, and just try and squeeze it and bring it down a little, maybe a little, on the Vertigo compressor, I got a 90 hertz side chain. I'll hit that in. So just again, just a little bit here, a little bit there to try and massage it and make it behave itself. But yeah, it's a holy grail for engineers. And I find that irrespective of the experience of the engineer or the studio that it was done in, 85% of the time, there's going to be something to deal with the bottom end. And this is no judgment on anyone. It's a fucking hard thing to get right. And so yeah, man, so that was a good insight on that. Now, another question that was generally asked of was, and I don't know how you're going to answer this one, but we'll see. We're living in this digital world now, and everyone is still the nirvana is to chase analog sound or analogness or something that doesn't sound digital. Now, you work a lot digital domain. Now, I remember you said to me that you've managed to achieve a pretty convincing analogness to your productions and mixes. So are there any particular tools or techniques that you use or approach in order to try and mimic more analogness?
I mean, the thing I always say to people about this is the same thing, is that whether you're using a plugin or a piece of hardware, you need to know how it works sonically to begin with. Now, guys like us who are older have grown up using hardware our whole lives. So when we use a piece of software, at least when I use a piece of software, I give myself to it 100%. And if I'm looking at a DVX160 plugin on the screen, for all intents and purposes, in my mind, that's a DVX160. And I forget that it's a piece of software, that it's running some routine or whatever, and put that in your mind, and you actually start to believe it. Not just because it looks like it, because it sounds like it. I had some 160s here, the actual hardware, and I started using Universal's 160s, and I'm like, I don't need the hardware anymore. And I A/B'd them, and I interchanged them in the mix, and the only way I could pick out the actual 160s was the noise, or the hum, or the noise floor at all, you know?
Right.
So I give myself 100% to the plugin and saying that this is that piece of hardware. You know, in my mind, maybe it's sitting somewhere here in my studio. I mean, yeah, I got a bunch of stuff behind me that I use. Like you can see the lexicons behind me, the 224Xs. I don't think anything sounds like them. And they're an integral part of my sound. Some days I won't use them at all, but more often than not, I'm using them both. The compressors I have in my rack, I've got some LA4s, 165s, some Universal stuff. They don't get used that often because I prefer the plugin in terms of recallability, meaning, and also that it's not going to sound different at, you know, noon, 3 o'clock, and 8 o'clock, which that's the charm of analog. It is what it is. It's something you're capturing in the moment. Digital always does the exact same thing. So for me, no matter what it is, I treat it like it's a piece of hardware. And I think that actually makes a difference. I mean, I read on forums a lot, and I read on Facebook groups a lot, people talking about, you know, how do I get that fat sound? How do I get that, you know, that compression, that, you know, the saturation? If I hear one more file come in here where somebody has saturated the drum tracks for me before they got them, I'm going to pull out my hair and look.
Wow. You received a lot of files there, Bob.
On my beard. Yeah, I have. And this has become a new thing with people. And I got to call them up and say, do you have a copy of these without saturation? I didn't saturate them. I'm like, I'm not an idiot. I record drums all the time, you know. They shouldn't sound all sizzly and fizzy, and, you know, I'll make them fat if they need to be fat, but I don't need you to fatten them for me. And people, a lot of times, have started to think that this, you know, a lot of these saturator plugins are going to make it sound big and analog. Digital is such an awesome medium. Again, you know, people say, you know, do I want to record 24-track analog? As a matter of fact, I don't. I don't want the hiss. I don't want to deal with the fact that, you know, some of your transients are gone, and that's really shocking to hear when you've been listening to digital all this time.
Yeah.
You know, it has a certain je ne sais quoi to it for cymbals and bass for sure, and guitar to that effect. But honestly, you know, I use, you know, Universal's Studer plugin, and I get that there, or their Ampex plugin, and I get that there. And there's a lot of other tape emulations. They're all pretty spot on in terms of what it is, and they're not fooling with it. Again, you need to treat it exactly like it's a piece of equipment.
Yeah.
You know, you don't slam the level because you want to hear the effect. That's the thing where people get pulled into, well, I want to hear the compression. I want to hear the tape saturation. And that's not what we've ever done. We don't want to hear it. It's just, it's part of the art of creating it. And, you know, so in terms of making something sound analog, it's just little steps all along the way.
Yeah.
You know, I start most mixes with a basic template that I've been developing over at least 15 years, you know. And then you build from there. Every now and then I switch it up where, you know, my drum compression more often than not is, you know, when I had the SSL compressor or the hardware version, that's what I used for my mix compressor. And that's still my mix compression, except I'm using Universal's version of the SSL G series compressor.
Yeah.
And that to me is how you're supposed to use it. And to my ears, it's exactly the same. Again, I had the equipment here to A/B them, and if I thought the equipment was that much better, I would have kept it, you know, but there was no reason to. I know that could make some people sad, and I'm not saying there isn't a place for like really good analog hardware, but we're in a place in the business now where we're not getting 1,500 a day to do recordings.
Yeah.
You know, you got to grab what you can when you can. And for me, buying a bunch of analog hardware doesn't make a huge amount of sense anymore.
I was talking to Ivana Manley a little bit about this, and we obviously she's fighting a good fight, trying to, you know, produce stuff or, you know, manufacture in America, which is hard anyway. You know, a good quality product to be competitive with so many people on the market now, you know, releasing good stuff. But I think in this day and age, for, you know, if I had to start my studio from scratch, from absolutely nothing, I would just go out, get an Apollo 16, get a fuckload of the UAD plugs, and I'd start with that. And I think I could work pretty well. And maybe a good pair of audio ears, headphones, and a sub pack. You know, if I had to start from nothing, if I had absolutely nothing and I had nowhere to be, or I had no dedicated place, that's where I'd go. And I think I could actually do good work. And we're seeing more and more people, you know, do it that way. There was a time where, you know, there was a lot of, you know, poo-pooing on plugins. And in this day and age, I mean, I've always believed that, okay, in the early days of when digital was in its infancy, yes, it was a fantastic revolution. It was brilliant that it started. Of course, it wasn't as good as analog, but in this day and age, first of all, I don't even worry why people have to worry about being analog. It's digital. It's just digital. So digital can never be analog because it's digital. It's ones and zeros. But
something else, yeah.
Yeah, but I understand the you know, all the romanticism that goes around it. But I think in this day and age you can do amazing stuff with you know, doing stuff in the box. You know, having outboard gear is nice. And yeah, yes, I'm an analog guy. And you know, before you're referring to getting files with stuff on there, I often get engineers who ask me, "Oh, is it okay if we put compression? Is it okay if we put a 2-track EQ?" And my answer to that is, mix the record as if mastering didn't exist. All I want is some headroom. Just give me some headroom.
That's actually really, really good advice. I'm going to write that down because that's, you know, this is make it sound the way you want it to sound. I mean, we can't, as engineers, we can't rely on whoever is going to master it. You know, it could be some name brand guy. It could be somebody you hadn't heard of, but don't you want to give somebody the best thing that you can?
Absolutely.
You know? And I'm certain I've given people files that are too loud, maybe a bit crispy, crunchy, because that's what I was feeling in the moment, you know?
Yeah.
You know, that's, you know, one of the most important things an engineer could know is when it's time to let it go, when it's time to commit and move on.
Absolutely.
You know? And so you've got to get yourself to that point where you're happy with it. You will be sitting here forever. That's the pitfall of digital. We keep going back and back and back. You know, I'm pretty sure Sting said it. You don't finish a mix, you abandon it. Yeah. And sometimes it's time to walk away. Which
reminds me, obviously, you remember the story of Billie Jean on
yes.
Yeah, yes. Right. So in short, basically, the story was that with Thriller, what held back Thriller was that they couldn't decide what mix to use on Billie Jean. And they had, I don't know, there was countless reels of them. And Quincy Jones sat down and threw up the first tape. And I think it was the second one where he said, "That's it. That's the one." And off they went. So all this work that poor Bruce Sweden had done, you know, was, well, nothing's ever for nothing. But again, sometimes you can get it done early. And there's power in decision. But that comes with time and confidence in your ability. And as creators, we're always self-doubting and always, is it good enough? Is it fine? Is it this? Is it that? I just tell them, my clients, if you're uncertain about a certain element of your mix, send me another version. It's digital. You know, it's like just, you know, I'm sure you got the hard disk space. Just print 2, 3, 5 versions. I don't care. Send them down. Let me make an executive decision, and then we can go from there. So, and yeah, mix it as if mastering doesn't exist. Just give me a little headroom. And I don't care if it's -6 or minus. I don't give a fuck about the numbers. Just so long as it doesn't look like a block of cheese when it arrives, I'm happy and I'm good to go.
A block of cheese.
Well, that's what it looks like sometimes, you know.
You know, very often clients will send me something for a reference. You know, one of my pet peeves, and I'm sure it was one of my Facebook rants, is people will say, you know, we're looking for this kind of sound, and they will send me a YouTube link. First of all, it's a YouTube link. And it sounds so awful. And the thing is, I usually, when people say they looking for a particular sound, I take that very seriously. And so I will, at first, you know, I'm annoyed because they'll text me a YouTube link, and I'm not really adept at getting it from a text into my computer to whatever. And then I download the audio, and you know, it sounds like ass, of course.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I'll actually go find an MP3 of the actual mix they're speaking of. And, you know, looking at the exact same problem, I look at it and all I see is a big brick. Yeah. And the thing is, I'm trying to get inside of what is it they're hearing in this that they want me to do? Yeah. Because if I gave them this, if I applied, you know, 3 levels of limiting to it, they wouldn't be happy.
Yeah, no doubt.
You know? And you're having to say to somebody, and you know, the thing an engineer never wants to hear is, if you send a mix to somebody, you want them to be happy about it. You know, you want to know that they like it. I feed off of other people's reactions, and I'm alone here most of the time.
Mhm.
You know, I love when clients come here and spend time with me and we can actually interface and bond. But for the most part, people don't come. They trust me doing whatever I'm doing and life is fine.
Yeah.
But you send a mix to somebody and they don't call you back for 2 or 3 days, which has become common now anyhow, which also makes me crazy.
Mm.
They'll call back and they'll go, hey, what would mastering make this sound like? I actually want to hang up on them and give them their money back. I can be a diva. Okay. And because the thing is, it's like, do you fucking like it or not?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. What do you want me to apply some pre-limiting to it? Tell you what, I will slap the TC Master X3 on it and we'll be done.
Yeah.
Then they won't be happy. I mean, I typically will not provide a client a version for their listening. Some engineers I know have done that where they'll give clients who lack imagination a version of it that's sort of pre-mastered, you know, multi-band compressed, the L3 multi-band or the TC or whatever. And I don't want to do that. I want you to hear what we've got here and we'll go from here. Now, you know, if something that I'm doing requires that you want more compression, then let's do that. Let's get it the way you want it and not like maybe someday somebody's going to master this and it might sound good. We can't rely on that.
Yeah. And I think that sometimes there is unmanaged expectations when it comes to mastering. Occasionally people think it's the panacea, it's going to fix everything. And you can do some pretty cool shit. There's no doubt about it. But in my world, and mate, call me old fashioned, Bob St. John, call me an old fuddy duddy. But I still like the approach of a mastering engineer being the framer of the picture, not someone who's repainting it. And of course, I don't always get that luxury with people. And so it requires a little dialogue to give some constructive feedback. And this is where I get the question, is this a good mix? Well, and you know, the subtext to that is, do you like me? Do you really like me? Do you? I'm Sally Field. Please like me, really like me. But no, but all jokes aside, I understand there's the want. They want to feel validated. They want to feel they're doing good work, and they rely on your opinion or they value your opinion. It's great. But good, in inverted commas, for me, the way I define it to all clients is, and this is me not being diplomatic. It's if I can listen to a mix and immediately know, can I work on this to a point where the final product will be something that a client will go, you know what? Maybe I spent a bit more than I should have, but I'm really happy I did. You know, it sounds as I remember it, but better. You know, or I feel like I got value. I feel like I got something for my money here, and I'm happy, even if I probably spent more than I potentially could have. And to me, that is a very binary thing. There's no, I'm not really sure. It's you know, I'll always do my best to try and prevent an engineer from going back and doing a tweak, and I'm happy to, you know, I'm not scared of a fight, but I also want to pick my battles. So, but for the most part, it's usually quite obvious. Super loud, vocal too loud or not loud enough, kick drum too loud, not loud enough, too much of one element, too much resonance in a certain frequency. Again, those things that you can't work on adequately, and to a point where, again, the client will go back and then they'll go, hang on a minute, he should have heard that. And rightly so. So that's how I define good in this day and age.
You know, as a mixing engineer, I'm nearly at the bottom of the hill where the shit flows downwards. You're absolutely at the bottom of the hill because that's where the rest of the shit ends up is on you, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, one of the difficulties of mixing is you are in that moment when when somebody's ego and their delusions and the reality all actually converge. And they've got to realize now that this is where we're at. You know, I'm pretty skilled at my job and this is going to be the best that it's going to be. Now, you know, anything, if you throw enough time and enough money at it, you can make a dramatic improvement. And just like you were saying, I spend far more time on some things than I should. Because when I listen to something and I can hear the amount of love and effort and energy somebody put into it, I cannot betray that by giving them only what they're paying me for, you know? And I'm looking at typical mixes of 4 to 5 hours, you know?
Mm-hmm. That's still real.
Sometimes,
You know, that's still sorry, mate. You were rudely speaking while I was interrupting. I'm terribly sorry. But 4 to 5 hours in this day and age, Bob, is still, you know, when we were coming up, a mix is typically a day, maybe even more. So 4 or 5 hours is not really a long time. And if you can put a lot of love in 4 or 5 hours, man, it's that's great. But I can see your point though, which is you've got a lot more options, so you've got more time to be able to do it. Whereas at our end, I've got left and right channel. I'm at the mercy of the mix. But I agree with you. I think that you can, when you can feel that love that's been put into it. You sense that thing, and so you want to honor that, and therefore you want to invest accordingly and meet and match them, if not exceed that.
You know, because there's a piece of me that will always be that kid who, you know, built his own reverb tank and was using a 6-channel console with an 8-track, you know, machine with rotary faders on it, where I was learning, but I wanted to create something that I could sit and listen to over and over again and be proud of it.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, there's at the end of the Sound City movie, there's just running random quotes through the credits. And there's a quote with Neil Young, and he said it, and it just spoke to my heart, because that's what we used to do. And he said, you're going to go in the studio and you're going to record, and you're going to finish the session. You're going to take home a cassette and you're going to listen to it over and over and over and over again on the way home. And you're going to play it for your friends. That has never changed for me. And, you know, I work on a mix, something I like. I'm going to go right from here. I'm going to go out for a ride in my car and listen to it. Mm-hmm. I'm going to critique it. I'm going to come back and make revisions. I've never lost that thrill of that. Mm-hmm. And, you know, sometimes I look back and, you know, I've done thousands of mixes, and I'll hear something, go, wow, that's not so bad. Or sometimes I hear something go that at the time I thought it was amazing, that sucks, you know. Thank God for the client who couldn't tell the difference, you know, and I knew I spent time on it. But again, just like you, I'm at the mercy of what people send me. You know, one of my pet peeves is well-known engineers who put a minimal amount of effort in, and they just keep getting the jobs because of their name recognition.
Yeah.
Guys who they spend an hour and a half on a mix and they brag about it. Well, fuck. If you got a great song that was well recorded, well produced, and well arranged, it doesn't matter who mixes it, you know.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean they're not doing a good job. But to me, some music deserves more respect than that. We are in a time where, you know, people listen with their eyes and not their ears.
Very true. Very true.
You know, if so-and-so mixed it, so-and-so mastered it, so-and-so produced it, they actually give it a pass when they shouldn't. To me, if I see something done by a major person, I'm expecting it to be something. And I've been in experiences where, you know, I mixed something and some other major person mixed it that I looked up to, and I'm like, and I heard it and I'm like, this is it? This is a cheap knockoff of what I did.
Yeah.
You know, and then I found out they heard what I did. Well, why couldn't they do something original? I had to do something original. And they got paid more than me. So that bothers me greatly. Not jealousy, that's not anything like that. What it is do you respect this music? Do you respect what an artist is giving you? You know, engineers are musicians, even if we aren't the ones playing, you know. And sometimes musicians forget that, you know, just because we're not getting to pick the ingredients in the cake doesn't mean we can't help them bake it.
Yeah.
To me, there's a sacred trust that an artist gives to me when they hand me tracks to mix. You know, do your best with this, you know, or impress us. You know, listen, some days this job is just a job. It can be assembly line of mixes that all sound the same, you know. And, you know, I've been very fortunate. And, you know, now lately they come more often, maybe because people get to record at home and they can spend time getting exactly what they want. I get really cool tracks that are really creative, really original, and well recorded. You know, that to me is the plus of the accessibility of technology. There are some people who are idiots and are never going to get it. But, you know, for the most part, I get better tracks now than I used to before.
I think that's great. I feel the same way about my clients too. I've often described it as I'm the midwife that's helping them give birth to their EP or their album or their single or whatever it is. And so we're all in this together. And I think one of the greatest aspects of my job is particularly when I'm in an attended session and clients have been through this whole process of tracking, pre-production, tracking, mixing, revisions, listening to it over and over and over, and they're losing their sense of objectivity at some stage. In the meantime, there's a backlog of other songs that they're starting to write and they're getting more excited about. And so they get here, and then when they see this thing become the final product, and they walk away rejuvenated, and they listen to it with a different ear, because this is what, you know, Johnny Punchclock is going to be hearing when he hits play. You know, now they still probably won't be able to hear it with the same level of impact, because part of my job is I tell people, I'm just trying to imagine, what is it like? How's it feel for the punter when they hit play for the first time? And you can only listen to a song for the first time once. Now, obviously, I'm not trying to nail it in one go, but I've got to get it down relatively quick, because after a while, then I'm going to lose that feeling of impact and that excitement and that you know, what it is that client is looking for, you know, that the final vision, that their hope that when the listener listens to it, boom, it hits them. So they've already gone past that stage. That'll, you know, it's like you can't unbake a cake. But yes, my friend, I'm with you. I think that you know, we can all sit here and be very, almost sound pompous and wanky about it, but it's a privilege to do work these days, and for people to give you their stuff and their art, and it's their babies, it's their expression. And I know in my world, you know, for someone to come and master a track with me, most of the musicians I work with, in fact, pretty much all of them, are not making a living. They're probably losing money. They come to me. It's money out of their own pocket. Sometimes they need to get grants. They'll loan money. They got to work shit-ass jobs, and I know what that's like. I did that for 20 years while I built my business. So, you know, I honor that. And so, you know, I spend a way less time earning the amount that than they do to create the money to come to me. So that's never lost on me. And so I always make sure that they get a good experience and a good product, and honor that, because it's a especially in this day and age, man. I mean, look at the choice people have. Look at the quality of people online. Look at the price point that you can get some incredibly talented engineers and the bang for the buck. People are really spoiled for choice. So, you know, so I think someone ever asked me this question, and for both of us, which is, what do you think is the differentiating factor in being successful with so much competition? And the answer I often give to that is, without sounding, you know, mushy or corny, is love for the client. It's, you know, service. It's, you know, how, you know, it's about, you know, this, you know, if we're talking about a whole bunch of guys, and it's very difficult to quantify, but, you know, guys who are similarly equipped and similar experience and sort of similar kind of discography, you know, it'll be the guy, you know, who I believe the guy who shows most interest, who genuinely, authentically wants to work with the artist, and who engages themselves, and who will go a little above beyond without actually, you know, turning into a cell block whore, you know?
Right. I mean, I love what I do, and I think that shows in everything that I do. And, you know, this is going to sound maudlin, whatever, but to me, the highest compliment I could get from an artist is, you know, when they're sitting next to me, or they call me up, and they have tears in their eyes, because this is something that is more than they could have imagined, more than they could have dreamed of. And those kind of experiences you have with people, they will never work with anybody else again.
Yeah.
You know, because you've given them what they wanted, what they dreamed, you know. And I've had that happen at least 3 times this year. It makes me smile, makes me cry in its own way, because it's like, listen, I'm giving you something. It's intangible. It's totally intangible, but here it is. And they said, this is exactly what I hoped it would be. You know, people always say, you know, this guy's a great engineer, or that guy's a great engineer. I know some great engineers who are not good engineers, not because they don't know how to do the job technically. They have awesome ears. They have great instincts, but you need to be kind. You have to listen to what somebody wants, no matter how fucking crazy it sounds. Don't be sarcastic. They say, listen, I would like the delay louder than the vocal on the left channel. Well, don't say what you really feel is, wow, that's a really fucking stupid idea, man. You say, let's see if I can make that work for you. And take it seriously. There've been times when, you know, I still get them now, because but when I was younger, I would be that person who really didn't want to try something and did it half-hearted. Now somebody says, listen, I'm picturing this sort of sound here that sounds like, you know, Cooper Time Cube, and I can't understand the lyrics. if that's what you want and that's what you hear in your head, I'm going to work with you on it. If you want to come here and record with me and you want to use your boutique guitar amp instead of a plug-in, which is going to be easier for me, I'm going to mic it up and use it. I'm going to take it direct too. And when we mix, I'm not going to tell you which one it is. You can go through the rest of your life thinking that we used your amp. Maybe I used it. I don't know, you know. But the thing is, you need to put people in that comfort zone that you've done everything you could, everything that they asked for. I've seen engineers who would make people cry because they wouldn't give them what they want. They were overly critical. They were mean when they were recording. Our job as engineers is to capture something.
Yeah.
And if we are working against you by arguing with you, by having an attitude, by making you feel less than, then that's actually what we're going to record.
Yeah.
You know, a recording is exactly like a picture. It's exactly like a movie. When we watch a movie, the object of us watching it is to be sucked into the moment, is to be sucked into the experience of it. We don't think of how it was assembled and composted with CG or dialogue replacement or sound effects or Foley. We don't think about that.
No.
We're not supposed to. And when,
Exactly.
as engineers, we're supposed to create that same illusion. That's where, you know, I've had drummers say, well, I don't want you using samples on my drums. And you know what I say? I says, I won't use any samples. And then when we're done with the mix, and I've used like 9 samples on their drums, even on the toms, they'll be, see, man, see how good my drums sound? And I'm like, yeah. Because you don't need to know. But you want to know what's in a sausage, for sure.
Yeah.
I just want to eat it.
Yeah, no, I completely... Yeah, but again, you know, I think it's good to educate clients. One of the things I really enjoy doing with clients is quite often I get surprised and they say, "Is it okay to come into a session?" And I say, "Yes." Why wouldn't it be? And they've had the experience of some engineers who charge more for attended than unattended, and I completely understand that business model because if you want to be efficient, I know I can do a lot more work during the day if I'm unattended, but one of the things I love about this job, and this is one thing I learned from my mastering mentor and the guy who I attribute everything, you know, in terms of my mastering is I attribute to him, and his name is Rick Essig, and he used to work at Frankfurt Wayne in New York City. And he said to me, the first thing he said to me was, well, the first thing, on the first day, we were sitting there and I'm watching him, you know, set up a lathe. He was teaching, you know, showing me how to cut a lacquer. And he said to me, listen, actually, I'm not even going to bother trying to do his Jersey accent because I'll just make a mockery of it. But he said to me, listen, 80% of this job is bullshit. And I looked at him, you know, and he says, it's bullshit, man. Reckons it's all about the hang time. You guys do that in Australia? I said, we used to do that to convicts, but he said, yeah, it's you know, people want to feel that they're invested, that you're involved, and it's about being with people and communicating and interacting. And of course, you know, in this day and age with more online and stuff being sent, you know, over the web, there are less attended sessions. But I love the attended session, and I love to be able to show people what's going on and explain to them the process. Because if there's one pet peeve I've had, and I've had it forever, Bobs and John, the whole bullshit around the black art, supposed black art of mastering. And I tell people there is no black art. We are not
it's
the
voodoo, man. It's fucking voodoo.
Fuck off. It's not. There's no. There's.
It's voodoo. No, I'm going to wave stage around just after talking to you.
We are not the gatekeepers to the secret society. It's just a skill set. I marvel mix engineers because a good mix engineer makes me look better than I really am. And you know, look, there's not a lot of profile. There's not a lot of prestige, even this day, even though in the internet, there's so much more knowledge around mastering and so much more information out there. I still get people mixing up the terms. We're just ringing to see how much you charge for mixing a song. I said, you mean mastering? Oh, yeah, sorry, I mean mastering.
I know people interchange those terms. It really aggravates me.
And I think if I can show people, because for me, what's important is not so much so that people understand what can be done. It's what can't be achieved at mastering, because I want them then to go back and understand these things, go back, and then they'll say, oh shit, next time around, we'll do this and we'll do that. We won't bring a mix this way or that way, because we know if we do this beforehand. And this is why I like to go through that due diligence of checking mixes beforehand. Again, just to be sure that, you know, it's at the optimal state. You know, there's just that thing where I know it's right. Now, anything from there is subjective and based on skill level, but the more illuminated people can be, even if they want to do their own, fucking let them do their own. I don't give a fuck. People think, well, don't you get worried that people master their own shit? The answer is no. Absolutely no. It's like a chef being pissed off at me for having, the gall to scramble my own eggs. It's like there's just some occasions where people have a budget, and occasion where they can justify the expense, and other times when they need to do something really quick. If I can help people help make better records or even better masters, and I'm serving them, I'm helping them, and frankly, I don't believe it actually helps my business. It doesn't actually take business away. That's been my experience with it, Bob.
I mean, I started doing mastering for clients over 20 years ago. Somebody asked me to do it, and I'm like, I guess I could do this. And I did it in a very rudimentary way, but it worked for me. And the mastering engineer that I used back when I was in Boston just moved on. He started doing something else. And the person who was doing it, I didn't like it. So I says, I guess I'm going to do this myself. I don't like doing it myself. And, and I do it for other engineers, and I'll do it for other clients. But I don't feel it's exactly my forte. One thing for sure I don't enjoy so much is mastering things that I do. I can do it. I'm perfectly capable of it. But if you're in the same studio, you're using the same ears, and you're using the same equipment, you're going to make the same EQ decisions, no matter how much you can get away from it. If I'm going to do that, I'll at least get away from it for a week and, pretend I didn't mix it, even though I did. Nice thing about that, however, is if I hear something wrong, that I made a mistake in mastering, I can go back and fix it myself. The problem is for a lot of engineers, and I know a lot of engineers are doing this, is we're making less money, so we've got to do something to improve our revenue stream. What your mentor said to you is something we're all missing out on now, because we do not hang out anymore.
Yeah.
I've got people that I've worked with that I haven't seen in 6 and 7 years, but I hear them once a week. I don't even talk to them because, especially when you're doing assembly line sort of stuff, you guys don't talk about much. Oh, here's some tracks. I'm going to, oh, this is who played on it. This guy played on it. That guy played on it. And their sound, where you're going with it. And we're all just doing the job. I know it can be a touchy area for some mastering guys because again, there's less money. So we're all scrambling around for that same money, whether it's $75 for a mastering job or $100 or whatever they're going to charge for it. I mean, I want somebody else's ears to work on it. However, they actually have to have good ears. And, not a lot of people show me stuff that I'm like, yeah, that's an improvement, because I expect an improvement.
Mm-hmm.
And, you already know the fastest way to piss an engineer off is to come back with it brick wall limited and squished so the dynamics are gone. A good mastering engineer knows how to do that and make it loud without killing it,
Yeah.
There's some guys who probably shouldn't even be mixing, no less mastering. So there's always that.
Well, look, I think that when it comes to to mastering engineers and the attitude of some around, again, we're the gatekeepers, we're special in some way. And look, I don't diminish the role of what we do, but I think we're in a world now where it's live and let live. And I think that the pie is big enough for everyone. In fact, I think the pie is expanding. There's plenty of room. Same thing with people like online, the Landau's of the world. When I get asked, what do you think of the online? Don't get pissed off. No, I don't get pissed off at Landau. I don't get pissed off at any AI. I don't get pissed off at anybody. Getting pissed off at anyone is just negative energy. It's not creative. It's not going to help my cause. And it takes me away from like, okay, well, how do
I've heard it. I'm just not impressed. That's all. And if, I'm going to be the first person always. If I hear something and it's great, I don't care about who mixed it, who mastered it. I'm going to say, hey, this is good. I heard some tracks that for a client that I was working with here who recorded here, and they had some guy in Puerto Rico, or maybe he was here. They went in and recorded. This guy recorded, produced, mixed, mastered this stuff. I think it was for $500. It didn't suck, And I would be the first one to say, hey, this sounds good. It was a little compressed and a little bright, but they didn't need my critique from that end. It didn't suck. And I'm like, that's a good job, And I work with them. And, so I had to actually measure up to that,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get paid much more than that for their job. They're a great band. Mm-hmm. But, it's okay to say that, hey, that's good, even if you didn't pay much for it, you know? I don't know how good automated mastering is, or what they call automated mastering, or like, you know, now I saw something with Abbey Road doing an online service too.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, you know, and the thing is, would I give that a try? I would rather deal with a human, somebody I can interact with and feel like I have a relationship with.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's each to their own. There's space for everyone. And I just know that the only way I'll get better is not by getting pissed off and pointing blame and, you know, just saying, hey, this isn't fair. Hey, life's not fair. Fucking deal with it. So, you know, I'm just going to get on. No, seriously, I'm just going to get on with it. And I think that everyone can live together, and I think it's great that there's choices, because here's the thing. For people that want to, and I've got clients that go to Lander, because again, it's like, listen, we only had $20 or it was just a quick thing to get done. Boom. You know, and there's no law against that shit. And I don't take it personally. But, you know, for me personally, the people that would use Lander as a go-to or regular, or that want to work at a particular price point in that area, they were never going to be my clients for the most part. And they're not the sort of people that I would want to go after anyhow. So why would I want to interfere with that process? You know, just, you know, I wish I had thought of the idea in the first place. I wish I had that business model, because right now I'd be flying over there in my private jet, and you and I would be having a sativa and a cocktail and just enjoying the sunset, my friend. You know, and if AI would get me there, bring it on.
Doesn't work like that. Nope. We're here doing the job.
You know, well, maybe I'll come over just in economy class, and you know, and we can sit and just enjoy the sunset.
I don't know. I think I flew from Florida to Sydney once. I felt like a human pretzel, and I was in business class.
Yeah, it's a long ass flight, man. It's
I think you actually it's faster if you just bore through the center of the earth.
Yeah.
To get to Australia, because I'm pretty sure you're directly underneath us.
Yeah, possibly. That's if you believe that the earth is round.
It's flat, isn't it?
Well, I know that I go flat out, so there's probably some merit in that. So what do you got? You got a lot of projects coming on for the rest of the summer?
I've got some. You know, I manage to stay busy, and even when I'm not busy, what I do is I meter my work. Then, you know, people get lucky if they call me and I'm not busy, because I will spend longer in the mix than actually they're paying for. And
I know you're busy, because how many times have we tried to get this podcast up? You're fucking busy.
I don't kill myself here working, but I work every single day and 7 days a week. You know, most of the, you know, I work a lot of weekends, because that's when people are now available, because it's not the old way. You can't really do music as a vocation like you used to be able to. Mm-hmm. So now it's like a hobby or a second job, you know, so you have to work around people's schedules. So what I do, I just go slower, because if I sit idle for a week, I'm in trouble.
Yeah.
And you know, it's like a freight locomotive, and then you've got to like get the inertia to get me moving again. And I'll sit here and I'll be like, you know, after like a week off, I go put up a file, and the fucking vocals out of tune, and what is this drum sound? And then I just go in the kitchen and have a coffee for 2 hours.
So how do you switch off, or do you? Like what do you do? What do you do to? I know me. I need some space away from here in order to come back feeling fresh. But that's just me. So how do you switch off? I mean, do you just take a walk? I mean, a 10-minute walk in the sunshine can be good too. But what do you do though in order to reset somehow?
You know, I have like 7 cats in the house.
Yeah,
which is a source of constant amusement, entertainment, and sometimes aggravation.
You're the crazy cat man, not the crazy cat lady. Yeah.
I am genuinely the crazy cat man. And so I'll take some time away from here. So I will take breaks often just to have a cup of coffee, and go upstairs, because, you know, downstairs is where I work, upstairs is not, and get away from things and look at stuff on eBay. I do photography as a hobby. You know, I raised a colony of butterflies 2nd year in a row, about 40 zebra longwing.
Have you seen, speaking of photography, have you seen the work, you know, Eddie Kramer? You know, Eddie Kramer's taken some fucking amazing photos.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
If you go online and have a look at his stuff, he's at a gallery, and he's you know, he's not you know, like he's legit. Like he's, I mean, not that I'm a critic of photography, but
that doesn't surprise me, because most musicians, most creative people I know have another creative thing they do, whether it's cooking or whether it's photography, whether it's some sort of art. Creative people have more than one creative outlet. And I always tell musicians this. A friend of mine called me up and he said, listen, for about 6 months, I didn't do any music, and my whole life was music. And I was starting to worry that maybe I was never going to do it. And I said, you can't just walk away from that, and he's an artist also. And then, he saw this bass he wanted when he was a kid on eBay, and he bought it because he could afford it now. And he said he got a hold of the bass and he started playing it, and he couldn't put it down. He said he figured after a year of not playing music, maybe he was never going to come back to it,
Yeah.
He couldn't do it professionally anymore right now. He was playing around bars and clubs here, but now bars and clubs here have DJs because they don't want to pay for musicians, which really sucks, and that's inside you forever. You don't escape it. My father's a baseball player, and so he didn't have a lot of creative things that he did. Baseball was his life, and he came up in the 50s, professional. And we were talking one day, and he said, a friend of his had, his son was going to to business school, and, got started in a band playing music. And suddenly, after about a year, he didn't want to go to business school anymore. All he wanted to do was music. And my father said, he said, what is that? Something. And I was able to connect with him on a visceral level with this. And I said, do you remember when you were a kid, playing stickball, because that's all they had, I said, and you started playing stickball with your friends and then baseball with your friends? He says, yeah. He said, it was the only thing I wanted to do. And I says, that's what music does. It grabs a hold of you and you can't let it go, Once it's inside you, it's inside you. It's a curse, but it's a beautiful curse. So most creative people I know do a bunch of other things, I met Eddie Kramer when we were doing, I think, Extreme 3. He hung out with us for an afternoon. You talked to him, what a trip he is.
Yeah.
I think he's a trip, that was just after he did the Hendrix book, the Setting the Record Straight book. Did you read it?
No.
He had a finished manuscript of the book before it was published. And it was such a great, we all read the book, over the course of like 2 weeks, because it was sitting, it's just, it was just all printed out on regular paper. And that guy's incredible. And, we tend to forget. And, a lot of these people are people who invented things we use every day.
Yeah.
Whether it's technical things or whether it's physical things. They came up with this stuff. It didn't exist before they did it. They're experimenting, but they use that creativity. So that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
That's, the thing is with, people find that amusing. I've taken many still pictures of things that, on the wall in the studio is just an endless collage of people working here and bits and pieces of my life, So, okay, I raise butterflies and I document them, both in video and film form.
Well, butterflies are amazing creatures when you think about it. They pretty much only have a day to live, right? For the most part.
These, we could do a separate podcast about my knowledge of zebra longwings. They're longest living butterflies. They live about 3 months. But I studied them so much because, again, you said, what did I do in my free time? I look on the internet reading stuff. If something interests me, I'll absorb it like a sponge.
Yeah. And I love general
you know,
knowledge.
Yeah. The coolest thing about a butterfly that very few people know is what happens once they go inside and make a chrysalis. For a long time, I believe this was just them changing their physical form somewhat, but it goes so far deeper than that. They literally ingest their entire body, and you have just a pile of caterpillar mush in there.
Wow.
With things called imaginal discs, which are like stem cells in a human.
Mm-hmm.
And that protein that they absorbed eating pretty much my entire passion flower plants, all of that goes into making them a butterfly. And it only happens in about a week.
Yeah.
Out comes this other creature.
Yeah. It's quite extraordinary, isn't it?
That stuff. Yeah, it's a wild thing. It really is. I'll do that in my free time. You know, I do a lot of stuff here in the studio. I'm still fascinated with electronics. I'm always rewiring stuff here. I'm always looking for better ways to do things. Part of why I do what I do is I just wanted to be near electronics and music. I fortunately didn't become a musician in the traditional sense. I can play, but I can't play well.
Yeah. I think this is what's going to hopefully, barring an asteroid or, a truck or, a slight moment of not being present on a freeway. This is what gives longevity to people. I put a post up the other day where I said, 90% plus of people are living these lives of, in some cases, quiet desperation, not doing what they love to do. And it's such a privilege and a joy to do that. And I think a big part of, apart from diet, exercise, management of stress is, indulging, even if it's a hobby, just having a purpose, doing the shit you love to do. And also, as we sort of talked a bit about before, to connect, just to have friendships and foster relationships. And even if we do it in the virtual world, some of the people I feel very, very close to, I've never met in the human form as yet. And yet there's still a connection. There's still something there. And there's an outlet and there's an exchange of energy, and it's healthy and it's wonderful. And I think that's the sort of stuff that helps in well-being and ultimately longevity. And, so I have to thank you, man, in recent times, because, when you're not too fucking busy, it's always good to sit and shoot. I mean, this is, remember how I told you when we first started talking, I said, these podcasts that we do, it will be no different to what we talk about when we just normally get on and talk shit.
Right.
And, which segues me beautifully into, I've got to get Larry Janis on the on the podcast, and because I know he's got a few fucking stories. And again, I have to thank Larry for hooking us up and being being the matchmaker in this case. I haven't spoken to him yet, but I've said to him, I said, man, because every now and again he throws up these YouTube songs. I said, Janis, I'm booking you for my wake. I will die. I will commit suicide if I have to make sure that happens before you die.
If I remember right, Larry's a nocturnal creature. So, and that works out for you because, nighttime here is daytime there.
Yeah. So and I mean, he's not a household name, but I don't give a fuck about that. He's got great stories and he's got a shitload of experience, and he's done a lot. As you said, he's done a lot of things in life. He's a fascinating guy. He's got a magnificent sense of wit about him.
His sense of wit is unbelievable. I don't think you know the half of it.
I don't, and I want to find out more than the half of it. I don't know him, and already I consider him one of my favorite human beings. There's just, I don't know what there is not to love about the guy, So I'm looking forward to having that opportunity. I said to him earlier on, I said, my people speak to your people, see what we can come up with. Bob,
I love your T-shirt, by the way. I just noticed it about 20 minutes ago. It was actually perfect for my lateness today. Sorry I'm late. I didn't want to be here.
Yeah.
Can I steal it?
Yeah, man. Well, listen, shoot me an address and I'll and what size you want. And I'll, they're in American Apparel, so the 100% beautiful organic cotton, no sweatshops.
I'm just talking about. I don't wear a T-shirt. I'm just talking about the phrase.
Yeah. You should get one. You should wear it. I'm sure that I've actually worn it out to some family occasions. I really have, for real. And it's interesting the response it gets. That's quite funny. Yeah. So, well, Bob St. John, as always, it's a pleasure and a joy. Thank you very much for availing yourself.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you for your patience and perseverance.
All good, man. All good. Everything happens as and when it's meant to. I'm very philosophical about things these days. You can focus on things, and you can have good intention, and you can push things to a point, but there's also a point where the universe will push back. So I try my best these days not to put too much importance on outcomes and too much expectation, and I just kind of feel things out, and I just trust in something bigger than me, and try and live my life with a sense of inevitability, that wherever it is I'm meant to go or be, I'll get there, even though it may the path towards it doesn't make sense. Yeah, because it's we are in a non-linear universe, and we are so left-brain thinking, and everything has to add up, and we need logic and reason and rationale, and it's got to add up and make sense to us. And sometimes things don't necessarily make sense. And our pathway to this podcast was a lot of twists and turns, but here we are, man. We got there. So what the fuck? I'm happy.
Me too, man. Me too.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, thank you so much. I love you dearly. Always appreciate your time and our conversations. And good luck with what else you're doing over the summer. And we'll be talking soon.
Absolutely, Jack. Thank you.
Good on you, Captain. You're a good man. Well, that is it. That is the end of our podcast. So thank you very much again to Bobs and John. And I certainly hope we've answered a few questions and delved into a few other themes and issues that may have been of benefit to you. And so I want to thank for the podcast today, Omega MMA, BJJ, where I trained with George Soteropoulos in Down Street, 6 Down Street, Abbotsford. So come on down, see us on the mat, and come and get yourself choked. No, you won't get yourself choked out. It's come on down, check it out. It's a great club, great people. And George, in the UFC, he had one of the longest unbroken streaks of victories over there. He's a great teacher. He's a great guy. He's the real deal. And you'll have a great time. And there's teenage classes now, and there's women's classes, and and I'll be down there, and it's a great place. So we'll look forward to seeing you down there at Omega. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and MMA and wrestling and all the other good stuff. All right, then, we're out of here. As I always say, please be nice to each other, but more importantly, be nice to yourselves. I love you fuckers. We'll catch you on the next podcast.